What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today's video we're looking at the PlayStation 4 release of Black Desert Online, the beta of which is coming up very shortly at the time of this video. So we're going to be looking at Ranger specifically, and this video is designed to help players that are going to be both playing Black Desert for the first time on PlayStation 4, or maybe that you're playing already on PC and Xbox, or you want to move over to PlayStation on the new release. And Ranger is the class that you're looking at. So this guide is essentially going to help newer players to Ranger understand exactly what the mechanics of the class are, as well as some general overview so that you can essentially get a leg up on your competition. I do recommend that if you are going to play Black Desert, to play in the beta phase of the game if you can, or if you can't, try to play on a PC or something so you get a little bit of a familiarity before the server's release. Fresh server releases are always really fun, so I think it's something that definitely worth doing is getting some practice in early, so that when the servers are released and there's a mad rush to level and get gear, you'll already understand the mechanics of the class, you can level faster, and also hopefully be able to PvP better, which is the goal of this video. So let's get started. So before we get into Ranger core mechanics, we have to understand the core PvP mechanics of the actual game. Now, what I'm about to say, some of you may already know because you're going over from PC or Xbox to PlayStation. You already understand how this works. Although I'm sure there are plenty of PC and Xbox players that actually don't understand how this works. But this guide wouldn't be nearly comprehensive enough if I didn't go over this, and it's not shown in the game literally anywhere. So it does need to be gone over it, so if you want to skip it, go ahead. But I recommend you just sit through it anyways. Basically, we're going to be talking about the CC mechanics and the protection mechanics, so you understand how they work, and this will help you when you actually play PvP in Black Desert. So CCs and protections are basically the counter to each other. They are what fundamentally defines Black Desert Online PvP, and so it's important to understand what they are. So CC, or crowd control, is any ability that prevents another user from using anything. It immobilizes their character essentially and allows you to do damage or combo or whatever. So this is important to understand, and it may sound more complicated than it actually is, so I'll try to make it sound as simple as possible because it really is quite simple. So every CC in the game, and there's a couple, are each given an inherent value. Now, most of the time that value is a 1, and there's a CC cap in the game, which otherwise means that you cannot land more than this cap. So a target becomes immune to CCs for a short duration of 5 seconds for a certain period of time if they've hit this cap of 2. So every CC is pretty much given the value of 1. So that's it. You can pretty much always land 2 CCs on a target. So your initial CC and then what's called usually a reset CC to keep the target on the floor or stunned or whatever for a longer period of time. The only exception to this rule is a stiffen, and stiffens are very short duration, which is why they're the exception, and they're valued as a 0.7. Why they came up with this number, I couldn't tell you. Why it's not a 0.9, it doesn't really matter. What's important to understand though is usually you can only land 2 CCs on a target, but if you throw in a stiffen at the beginning or the middle of the CC chain, then you can land 3. So let's say you start off with a stiffen, that's 0.7, then you landed a knockdown, which is a 1, then that's 1.7, you can still land another CC at that point. However, if you land a knockdown, that's 1, and land another CC, that's 2, so then you couldn't stiffen or do any other type of CC because you've hit that 2.0 limit. That's it. That's what you need to understand. It's very simple, and hopefully it came across simple, but it's not explained in the game, so if you have any further questions on this, feel free just to ask me in the comments and I'll clarify anything you might need. So there's 2 types of protections in Black Desert Online. There are iframes, super armors, and forward guards. And they all serve to protect you from CCs, and they do it in different kinds of ways, but they also, some of them protect you from damage as well. So to understand how this works, we'll first look at the iframes, which are invincible frames. This basically makes it so that you don't take any damage, and you don't take any kind of CC. You can't be CC'd, you can't be targeted, you can't take damage. So it's a very, very good type of protection. The next up is Super Armor. Super Armor is essentially an ability to protect you from CCs in every single direction. It doesn't matter if they're behind you, forward, in front of you. It doesn't matter. You cannot be CC'd during a Super Armor state. The final kind of protection is Forward Guard, which is a little bit different. Forward Guard has an actual block. Not only protects you from CCs that are coming at you frontally, but it also protects you from damage frontally. This is very nice because it basically gives you a little bit of breathing space as someone is doing damage or landing a bunch of CCs on you, or attempting to, I should say. Now, Problem with forward guard is if someone is positioned differently and is behind you, forward guard does nothing if you're not facing the target. So if they're behind you, you're going to get CC'd and take damage. So you need to be careful with that. It does have a little block that comes up, and the block can be depleted. Now, you could argue that there is another type of protection in the game, which is like an actual block, which warriors and valkyries will have in the beginning of the pre-awakening state. But essentially all that is a super armor and forward guard combined. Which means they can't be CC'd in 360 degrees of protection like a super armor, but also have a guard which can be depleted but protects them from damage. So this is kind of the extra exception to this rule, but overall this is pretty standard across the board. So that's how protections work, and these are really important to understand, and we'll get into what Ranger has in a minute. So EES, Evasive Explosive Shot, is your only iframe in pre-awakening. It has a gap right at the very start, but the first two jumps are iframe. After that, it is iframe only after every other while it's on cooldown. So essentially the third and fifth hop are not iframe. This is useful because the skill is hardly catchable by pre-awakening toolkits that most classes will have, so that's useful for you. And also ES costs mana, so it gives you a chance to actually move away from your target while semi-protected. Next up, we got Call from Sky. It used to be an iframe, which was great, but now it's only a super armor. It does cost a ton of stamina though, but it is spammable, has no cooldown. So in order to do this on PC, you press W, left mouse button. You press left mouse button super quick, otherwise you will just basically shoot the ground. So this will be true, well, it was true on Xbox, it'll be true on PS4. You're going to have to make the slightest of tap presses, but it does allow you to chain protection for a little while and give you a chance to evade some hits. It does have a gap though when you land. You're only protected when you're in the air, so you have to be careful of that. The second you hit the floor and you're not fast enough, you get CC'd. Sadly, those are the only protected skills in pre-awakening, but what you do have is the ability to CC people with Evasive Explosive Shot, the skill I first showed you, and that can be combined out of Call from Sky. So if you press right mouse button out of Call from Sky, it adds EES, which can then stiffen your opponent. So starting with the kind of core is Ultimate Evasive Shot. It's a skill you'll want to learn. You won't get Absolute Evasive Shot until Absolute skills are released, but you will get Ultimate Evasive Shot, which is a skill that allows you to cancel a lot of bow abilities, such as Blasting Gust. As you can see here, I have Absolute Blasting Gust. You will want level 3 Blasting Gust, not Ultimate, just level 3. Used normally, it looks like that, but you can use it in a variety of different ways, such as a slide long range knockdown like that, or the more commonly used, which is the normal cancel that will look like this. It also has a knockdown, as you just saw there, when it is on cooldown, or sorry, off of cooldown. So you can also use Shotgun, which is Extreme Charging Wind out of Blasting Gust, so it's nice for a variety of reasons. It does provide you some degree of expensive mobility, albeit quite quick mobility, but you wouldn't want to spam it too much because it is very resource intensive with stamina and mana. But it's very nice, and it's important because it's the only way you can knock people down in the pre-awakening. So you can see here I'm just using a lot of Extreme Charging Wind, which is just sort of a to be honest, Shotgun is the skill that Rangers are most commonly known for, but there's a lot more detail that goes into the bow than just Shotgun, so we'll go into that. So let's talk about Penetrating Wind and its cancels. Penetrating Wind is a high damage nuke ability. I'm showing you the absolute, but you won't be able to get the absolute yet because that's a later update, but you can get everything before that. It's a high damage nuke ability that also has an ability to down smash. Down smash is a separate mechanic to CCs. It doesn't actually apply to the CC cap. It allows you to briefly extend a knockdown period, but we'll get into that later. Tearing Arrow is the skill I like to use the most to get into it because Tearing Arrow has a debuff on it. I'll show you how to get into Tearing Arrow here. So basically just S and then E. And then you can left mouse button to fire a Tearing Arrow shot. It's really cool because Tearing Arrow has the 30% movement slow and a bleed on it. So if you fire that quickly first before Penetrating Wind, you can apply really nice slow on your opponent, make it really hard for them to gap close on you. So to look at, like, this is what it looks like with Penetrating Wind being cancelled. So basically shift, and it's actually shift and right mouse button. I add left mouse button just because it's comfortable to do so. Of course, this will depend. You have to reverse engineer this on PS4 and see what it looks like. You can also add the skill Shotgun because while doing this cancel, you also use the skill Charging Wind, which is the precursor skill to Shotgun. Charging Wind also has down smash on it, so you have double chance to down smash. So this is a nice little set of things. It might take you a little bit of practice, especially if you're adapting this onto the controls of the PS4. Now, you can also cancel Penetrating Wind using Tearing Arrow like this, which is basically just continuously sending out penetrating winds at your target, which can be useful for fishing for down smash if you so choose to do so, but it's just something to keep in mind. So down smash is essentially one of those mechanics, once again, that BDO doesn't explain properly to you, but like I said earlier, all it is really a way to extend a CC on an opponent that is already on the floor. So it's useful to know how to do it, and how much you'll be able to get away with on a console is difficult to say because you'll be capped on FPS, which is kind of a big factor in being able to cancel this quickly enough to search for enough down smashes. But again, it'll be worth you testing it out. So what you can see here is just a little bit damage on these scarecrows from range. So a little bit of shotgun, blasting gust, and tearing out into penetrating wind. Now, the problem with penetrating wind is, unfortunately, they changed it a little while ago that while the skill is still cooling off, if you use it again, it resets that cooling off period, which is very, very frustrating. So you could choose, if you wanted to wait until it was off cooldown, but that's up to you. So what I'm going to show you now is another flow to get into penetrating wind, the second most common flow, which is the sharp feather flow. Now, you have to unlock this flow, and by doing so, you can trick the game into thinking you're landing a kick by landing an arrow at the exact same time. So you can see there, it doesn't work, right? If I kick, as my arrow lands on the scarecrow, I'm able to use penetrating wind. So it's all about timing here. So I'm just showing you what this kind of looks like. So this is just showing you doing it once so that you can hit a shotgun ability first. However, you can choose to just spam penetrating wind out of sharp feather, which looks like this, which is all about the timing once again. This could be useful for fishing for down smash as well if you choose to do so. So next up, let's talk about Will of the Wind, a very critical bow skill. This is a sort of melee range bow skill. It's very interesting. It also is another skill you can cancel into shotgun, by the way, with spacebar out of the actual two main cancels for the skill. This is how you do the skill normally without any cancel, Shift Q. You don't want to do it this way because it's way too slow. It also doesn't give you any mobility, and range is all about maintaining that mobility. So ultimate evasive shot, again, the skill that allows you to cancel a bunch of abilities, allows you to use A and F and D and F as directional keys to control Will of the Wind. So for you, that would be a directional key plus whatever F happens to be on the PlayStation controller. So there you go, you can do that by circling an opponent. However, if you're trying to change direction, it's a bit clunky, especially if you have a kick unlocked. There is actually another cancel for this. It's faster and it does more damage, so you'll definitely want to learn how to do this, but it is more complicated because it's way more key presses, certainly on PC, and it will be on PS4 as well. So I don't know what that's going to look like for PS4, key presses wise, but yeah, you can see there, obviously that's Blasting Gust, which also uses the button Q. So Shift Q was the Will of the Wind earlier cancel, or sorry, no cancel was Shift Q Will of the Wind. But if you use the Blasting Gust, you can essentially do a new cancel with Blasting Gust involved in it. It doesn't use the Blasting Gust cooldown, which is great, and essentially it looks like that, which is great. And you can also add Tearing Arrow into Penetrating Wind Shotgun if you so choose to. So you could Blasting Gust to knock them on the floor, do the Shift Q Will of the Wind, and then go straight into Tearing Arrow, Penetrating Wind. So that's really hard to do in terms of the Shift Q Will of the Wind. It just requires a lot of practice. What it's going to look like on PS4 controller, I don't know. Hopefully you guys will be able to figure it out, and it'll look really nice and be really powerful. So the other real practical CC you have in your pre-awakening kick is Crescent Kick, and I say practical very loosely. It looks like this. Resisted the first time, second time lands. It is a float CC, which does extend a knockdown period, but isn't a true knockdown, not the actual pure knockdown that Blasting Gust is. A float does put a target on its back or resets them on their back, but doesn't last very long. So it looks like that, basically. You can use it if you want, and it does style on nerds, but you're probably actually better looking for a down smash. You can try and down smash out of the after the float, but you'd have to be so quick to make that work. So like I said, Blasting Gust is one of your key toolkits because it's the best CC you have in the pre-awakening kit, so you have to use it correctly. So you can slide dash, which would be normally the slow way to get into Call from Sky, but instead of doing the spacebar to get in Call from Sky, you can do Blasting Gust. It does send a long range CC, so you can see here we'll use it at a longer range than we did the last time, just like that. So it's very useful for catching people that are trying to run away. You can catch them with Blasting Gust. Now there is another way to do it, and I'll just show you quickly after I show you how to cancel Call of the Earth. Call of the Earth is a skill that is a pre-awakening buff that allows you to buff your accuracy. You would only get it if you had plenty of skill points remaining after getting the more critical skills, but that's how you cancel it. But you can also use Call of the Earth to cancel into Blasting Gust. So accuracy buff straight into Blasting Gust. Now it's important to note the Blasting Gust also has an evasion debuff, which means you are buffing your own accuracy and debuffing your opponent's evasion right into Blasting Gust, where you can of course do a combo out of those skills. Now you may notice a skill after Evasive Explosive Shot called Riding the Wind. By the way, don't get Evasive Landing Shot, which is below, but Riding the Wind is an interesting skill. It does cost a lot of stamina to use Riding the Wind, but it has some interesting aspects. Its damage scales off with the bow skill, which, especially when you get Absolute, will do a lot of damage. I'm not sure that it'll do a ton of damage now before that, but it looks like this. It's essentially a sort of umbrella skill that you can use. It scales off of the bow skill. Now, it does do a lot of damage, actually, but for you, whether it's going to be really worth it over, say, Will the Wind, probably not, but it is going to be really nice for styling on people. You can of course use Riding the Wind as an evasive movement skill, as you just saw there, and it can actually send you even further than that depending on how you choose to use the skill. Of course, if you do knock someone down, you can then go into the skill and then do like just one Riding the Wind and then go right into, as you saw there, a Tearing Arrow Penetrating Wind combo, or you can just use the skill as a general evasive movement skill, which it looks something like that. So it's not protected, but it does provide you with some extra mobility. It does cost a ton of stamina, as you can see though, and it does also mess up some of the shotgun cancels, so you want to keep that in mind. But if you really want to go above and beyond with Ranger, you can test it out. So talking about chasing or evading an opponent, you have two options. Evasive Explosive Shot allows you to use mana resource as the only resource to get away, plus it's partially protected, plus the CC. So it's going to be harder for an opponent to properly chase you down if you have plenty of mana to use that. You can also, of course, put your weapon away and run. Don't run like that, run like this instead, where you have your weapon away, because you have a passive movement speed if you do so, and it uses very, very little stamina. And of course you can swap in a bow and try a long range CC. So that's pretty much it, guys. Whenever I make a video like this though, I always look back after I've rendered it and think, crap, I wish I'd added this or that. So if you do have any follow-up questions, you can ask them in the comment section below, or of course you can come by my stream and ask me then I can give you a live answer. So if you have any follow-up, you can always ask in a live setting, which I think is always better. So that also extends to if you have just generic questions about PS4 BDO, maybe you have gearing advice questions or anything along those lines, you can ask. Big shout out to my boy Effort for being basically my training dummy here. Thanks so much, man. Really appreciate it. And also a big shout out to my boys in the Woke Discord. You know who you are. So yeah, that's it. Thanks so much for watching. Have a kick-ass time, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.
Peasants, I bring news! Join me in PC gaming and ascend to godhood! For you are weak, and I am mighty!